You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And maybe someday you'll join us, right? And the world will be as one. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I think I'm going to take my earring off. I think I'm going to take that off. Yes. All right. I'm going to stick that in my pocket because I know I'll forget that too. I'm so excited, y'all. So let me first off tell you that my title today was Ignorance is Bliss with a question mark, right? It's all good. It came out and it just said ignorance is bliss. That's good too, right? Because what I wanted to talk a little bit about today is this idea of finding our bliss. But, there is a part of us who, sometimes we like to make everything and think everything is so clear and scripted, right? In New Thought, let me just say this. I love New Thought because, what happened for me is I grew up, and y'all, I'm going to take my time within the next 20 minutes, I guess. I'm going to take my time. Whatever. In New Thought, I came to New Thought out of a Baptist teaching. And in that Baptist teaching, I was kind of, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, sit down, shut up, listen to what I say, and do what I say, and what you feel or think doesn't matter. And so when I came into New Thought, there was this idea that I found that was explaining some stuff. I needed explaining, Reverend Hank. I needed to understand what it was that, how I fit into this stuff. I mean, I was told like we were supposed to learn this Bible about something that happened thousands of years ago over in a land with people who didn't have the same anything, I thought, as me, except for this thing called life. And so when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself about, stuff like Adam and Eve, I was like, if I was Eve, I would have ate the darn thing too. I kind of get caught up in some of the things, the questions that come out, right? I would have, if you told me that, even today, I'm going to be honest, even today, if you told me this is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Sandra will take a bite. It's in my nature, it's who I am. And so I grew up with this thing of lean not to your own understanding. And when I came into New Thought helped me because it started to answer some questions that had long been in my mind. And I don't know about how you all study the Bible and all of these things, but I love going on this thing called truthunity.net. Anybody? Yeah, right? And they've got the metaphysical dictionary. And in this metaphysical dictionary, you look up the meaning of words and places and all kinds of things so that we're unlocking meaning that has always been right there, but we didn't have access to it. And so when I started to have permission, because that's one of the things that New Thought does. It gives you permission to look beyond the veil. Like in the Wizard of Oz, right? Pull back the curtain and see what else is there. It gave me permission to look at that. And so I understand that there are a lot of people, a lot of times we're still in resistance because we've been taught Look, I know I'm going to step on some toes, right? I'm sorry, but I'm not, right? But for those of you that are recovering Catholics, sometimes we're raised to even believe that going into and looking at something that is different from what you have always learned is a sin in and of itself. And so we've been put into these little boxes, and we just exist in the smallness of our ideas. There is a problem for me when you have something that is canonized, so to speak, meaning that this is it and this is all it's going to ever be. And for me, God is continuously evolving and revealing itself every single day. But what happens is that we let fear get in the way of our learning and reaching for more. And so how do we break free of the fear? Now, here's the other toe I'm going to step on. We are existing in a system right now where people are in fear. We call ourselves the land of the free, home of the brave, but yet we're afraid right now to question what's going on in our government. We're afraid to have dialogue because somebody is always listening. My phone is even listening to me right now. And so what happens is we, instead of expanding, we're contracting. And that is a danger. And so when I start to think about this thing of ignorance is bliss, sometimes what we do is we turn a blind eye because we think somehow that's safer. How could that be when we're God is continuously evolving, expressing, coming into fruition, and we're cheating our kids out of what is possible out of fear. We have to begin to do something different. So when I started thinking about this, I kept thinking to myself, like, there have been people who have pointed to this, pull the curtain back. I love it. And so when I started thinking about the stories, I wanted to kind of, Joseph Campbell has always been one of those that have been powerful and good for me. But so too has Yoda. I mean, when you think about some of the messages that we receive out of Hollywood, out of people who are in the know, and so when we say, there is much, I sense much darkness or much fear there, then you must go, right? Sometimes we have to move beyond what it is that we're afraid of, what we think makes us different. Sometimes people will say, I don't see color, right? Well, how dangerous is that? If you can't even acknowledge the places that I might be different, right? We can't just turn a blind eye to things. Maybe we have to figure out how to be curious, and curious with an open mind, because we really want to know. That love brings us to the point where we're actually seeking instead of just demonizing everything. And so, I started, looking back, and I'll tell y'all, I don't know if I mentioned this last time because I don't know if I had started reading it yet. But I've been reading this book called When God Was a Woman. You laugh. Last name, I think her last name is Merlin. It's really a dense read, right? It's one of those, it seems like a collegiate book, right? With all of these citations and everything. I get it. People want to really, let you know that they've actually researched this stuff and, gone to the different countries. And, and they said in the book, it talks about, it's like they didn't even try to hide that God was a woman. You can still go into tombs and see carvings on the caves that have this worship of the goddess and of the woman and earth as mother and all of this stuff. It was like, it's all there. They didn't necessarily cut her out. They just demonized her. They just discredited her. And then we started to, it's almost like we gave it a different story. So instead of Eve being somebody that, opened up something, all of a sudden the idea is that Eve created and brought on sin. But here's the funny thing, though. I got to tell y'all this because I find this stuff fascinating. I don't know if you do too or not. But in the book, It talks about the reason that women were worshipped was because we kept squeezing out life. And they couldn't figure out why. Where are these things coming from? She must be a god. If she can just, you know, we see it growing in her, and then all of a sudden, here comes life. You know, she is something to be, they were worshiping at our feet, right? She was the only thing that bled and didn't die. And so woman was held in high esteem. And then comes in science, I'm sorry, you know. Comes in science, and then they try to simplify it and make it seem like, this is nothing. As a matter of fact, now we need to put all these laws on you that constrict and restrict. So we know exactly whose that is. You know, it's not like a litter and you don't know who's the... It became a thing of suppressing this. Wonder if we all took this attitude that God is spread out on the kingdom, that the kingdom is in front of you, and everything that we see is part of God. Wonder if we took a different idea or a different stance and really decided to, you know, like take a bite, to experience this thing called love and light. So when we start thinking about this idea of ignorance, I just wonder if it is that ignorance is bliss, or is it the choice not to get stuck that's blissness? I mean, we're all old enough to know, right? We're all old enough to have tried and lived a little bit, have some life experience that tells us the danger of getting stuck on something, obsessing over some idea. I get it. You know, when you got an ache or a pain, there's that thing we want to put our attention there. We want to put our energy there. When we have, you know, something that happens on our job, it's as if it sucks our being, it sucks our attention. We get stuck in this repeat over and over again, ruminating over things in our mind. We have a tendency, the mind does, this tendency to get stuck. And so what happens is that we begin to think that somehow the thoughts that we have this power. But is it that the things we think about have the power? Or is it the thinker that has the power? So, if we're the thinker of things, right? And this is one of the beautiful things I love too. If we're the thinker of things, do we not get to choose the narrative? Choose the way we think about things? You ever think about that? Like I was telling them earlier, maybe if we recognize that our silver is our power, right? Wonder if we recognize that our connectedness is our power. I see so many times where we're busy trying to be so, y'all, this is just Sandra talking, you know. But sometimes we try to be so upright and perfect, as if we know what God is thinking about the things that we do. We try to be upright, perfect, and good people. What does that mean? What does that mean to a God that created an aardvark and hippopotamus? All of these things that seem like they would not quite fit, but yet they exist. I mean, you ever think about that? That maybe God does love the grittiness? Maybe this thing that we call God loves the underbelly of life where it's grimy and curious. Maybe it's not that any of this stuff is meant to harm us, but rather to elevate us. Maybe what we need to learn is that even this thing we call God has the right to be, what's the word I want to use? Mysterious? Nebulous? Changing? Free? Capricious? Unknowable? Changeable? And sometimes what we need is we need these stories that really tell us that, yeah, it may seem on its face to be one way, but God can also be a trickster. It can also show up in ways that you didn't expect, and that too is good. That too is God. I love the movies that kind of bring in these ideas of right and wrong, and yet things go and they turn out in a particular way. I can't help but, imagine that when we see some of the creations that we see, that, this too is beautiful, this too is good, this too is life. So maybe it's not God punishing you, right? Maybe it's, maybe it's giving us a different way of looking at things. Maybe those aches in our knees are there for our highest and best good. I don't know, right? Maybe there is a part of us that changes as we grow. And it means slow down, not stop. Maybe it means think a different way. Maybe it means that we have the responsibility to bear witness to those who are coming after us to speak our truth. Maybe we talk about the times where we exercised courage, the times where we showed up with our bodies or with our voices and spoke out against tyranny. Maybe it's we showed, and here's the thing. I used to do this in the backyard. My parents didn't know it. When they would tell me, if you do that, God is going to strike you down. And I would challenge it. I'm going to say it anyway. And wait to see if I'm going to see scorched earth around me. Maybe we'll talk and bear witness to the fact that we tried God and God yet loved us anyway. As a matter of fact, maybe we'll stop putting God out there and recognizing that we embody that very thing that we call God. It is not separate. It's not apart. It is us. And guess what? It can be me and you at the same time, right? Showing up in each and every one of us at the same doggone time, and it be perfect even in your secret thoughts. Even in those moments when you would be like, ooh, if anybody knew what I was thinking, right? That too. I don't know about y'all, but that too. So this thing of finding our bliss and following our bliss, Joseph Campbell used to said, follow your bliss. And here's the thing. Somehow somebody told us that the only things worth doing was the things that brought us money or recognition. But what about happiness? What about our bliss? So people ask me all the time, well, what do you do for, to relieve stress? Nobody believes me when I say, I talk. I mean, really, you laughing at me. He said, such a woman, is it? No. But if you look on my Facebook timeline, y'all see every morning I get up and I talk. It does my body, my mentality, it does all of that good. What do you do that makes you feel good? What do you do that brings joy? And sometimes it's not about what anybody else thinks about it. there are people who study insects for a living. And sometimes, I don't know who told us that, it's only about, that only the educated people do it. No. They got it from somewhere else. Let me tell y'all this real quick, because I know my time is up. Back in the day, I always bring up this story, and I don't know if I've told this to you. It's not a story. It's just what happened. I don't know if I told y'all about this, but back when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, she went through, and that's a long walk. It could be a very long walk. And I had left school to, do the caregiving thing, and at some point she needed to get one of those colostomy bags. I don't know if you've ever been through that, but they, cut a hole and and whatever. It's not pretty. It's intense. And I remember there was a woman who was coming to the house to do wound care and to show me how to take care of it, right? So she comes to the house and she shows up, and I'm looking at her as she's walking up the walk, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I didn't see a car pull up. Okay, right? No big deal. Here I go running to the door. Whether she was driving a car or not is not the point. Sometimes people get caught up in there, she could have came on a broom for all I cared. She was coming to help. And so, let her in, and we're in there and we're doing wound care on my mother, and it's a lot of pain. It's so much pain, and and I'm trying to get past the fact that my mother is in pain. I'm crying, she's crying, and yet we got to change this wound. And so my mother is, when we get done, my mother falls asleep, and so I'm having a conversation with this woman. And I asked her, I said, she like Mary Poppins to me now, right? She coming in, doing work, and helping me with what I needed. And so I started trying to figure out her story. And she was like, I've been a nurse for like 38 years. And I said, what you doing? First of all, what you doing catching a bus? And what you doing doing these household things? And she says, well, they just passed some kind of regulation, some kind of law that what I've been doing for 38 years now needs to have a degree. She says, as a matter of fact, I was teaching some of the doctors that came in how to do this thing, how to do what they're doing. And now they're telling me I got to have a degree. And so I refuse to work in that system anymore. So I do this. Now, I don't know about y'all, but we've got all these things out here, and this is no shade on anybody, but we got all these people that chase after these degrees, PhDs, and all of this stuff. And then we throw away people who have been doing this work because we think somehow that those letters and jumping through those hoops make them more aware than somebody else. So what's gone is the conversations that women have around the kitchen table over a cup of coffee that heal us, that make us whole. For some reason, we no longer bear witness to one another. We're going to seek somebody else to help us to figure out problems that we used to work out together in community. We would come together, what did they call them, hen parties, and heal one another. Y'all, at a certain point, we have to realize that sometimes the wool that's been pulled over our eyes to blind us to the truth is robbing us of so much richness that we might have if we just connected. My story might be your story. My story might have something to do with the thing that you're going through. God is so perfect that he is sending to you the answer right now if you have the courage to embrace it. But because it's a 6-year-old that came to you with this little tidbit of awareness, you got to reject that because he doesn't have a PhD yet. But maybe, just maybe, it's a little more connected than what you might be. And maybe, just maybe, it hears the voice of God speaking in and to it. And so it can then, that child can then convey to you a message that you needed to hear. Maybe it's saying, Grandma, maybe you ought to lighten up. Grandma, maybe you need, right? Sometimes we need to stop thinking that, that God has to, Jesus has to, that our answers have to show up in a particular packaging. Maybe all of this world is here for us. Maybe, just maybe, right? So is ignorance bliss? Or is it just fear? Is it the things that we keep out? So, I say all that to say, be open. Be open. Open at the top, waiting for this beauty that is God to reveal itself to us. Maybe there we'll find our true bliss. All right, I think I went way over my time, but it's all good. That's what I got. Blessings to you.